When Revelation says that the woman, that is, believing Israel, fled into the wilderness, where God had prepared a place to care for her for 1,260 days, we know that the only people who are specifically spared harm during the day of wrath are the 144,000, so this image primarily represents them. But Jesus actually warned all of Israel to flee during this time, saying, "Those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return even to get a coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones." It seems that the physically fit will be at an advantage when it comes to evacuating Jerusalem at this time of Jacob's trouble. Luke records Jesus as saying, "Keep alert at all times and pray that you might be strong enough to escape these coming horrors and stand before the Son of Man." This verse is sometimes used out of context and presented as evidence of a pre-tribulation rapture, but taken within its context, we see that Jesus is actually talking about Jacob's trouble, the Antichrist's attack on Israel and Jerusalem. Jesus is giving practical advice to those who are in the area at this time, telling them to run for the wilderness. That's why he says nursing mothers will be at a disadvantage and the weather conditions will help or hinder. Revelation tells us that the ones who are strong enough to make it into the wilderness will actually be safe for the full 1,260 days of Jacob's trouble. Those who don't will be in for a very hard time, and if it lasted for any longer than the 1,260 days, there wouldn't be anyone left. God cuts the time short for the sake of his people. Interestingly, our prayers can affect the time of year that this happens. We can make it slightly easier on the believers in those days by praying that it happens in spring or summer rather than winter. Through this passage, we again see that our prayers can have eternal significance. It's good to get the spiritual, heavenly view on Jacob's trouble. It gives us a lot of insight into the interplay between heaven and earth, including the events that caused the Antichrist to suddenly turn violent on Israel halfway into his reign. Then there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels, and the dragon lost the battle, and he and his angels were forced out of heaven. This great dragon, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all his angels. Then I heard a loud voice shouting across the heavens, "It has come at last, salvation and power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down to earth, the one who accuses them before our God day and night. And they have defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony, and they did not love their life so much that they were afraid to die. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who live in the heavens rejoice, but terror will come on the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you in great anger, knowing that he has little time." When the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child, but she was given 2 wings like those of a great eagle, so she could fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times, and half a time. Then the dragon tried to drown the woman with a flood of water that flowed from his mouth, but the earth helped her by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that gushed out from the mouth of the dragon. And the dragon was angry at the woman and declared war against the rest of her children, all who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimony for Jesus. Then the dragon took a stand on the shore beside the sea. Around this climactic time of Jacob's trouble on earth, there's actually a climactic war taking place in heaven too. That might come as a shock to those who are used to thinking of heaven as a serene place, totally devoid of evil. Indeed, while none of us have seen heaven and it's difficult for us to picture it, I suspect that if we had to try, we would find our imaginations tainted by the pop culture image. A floaty, dreamy, white, colourless, quiet place where loved ones sit on clouds with a ghost of a smile around their faces and a kind of serene vegetative state, playing harps and staring into the middle distance for all eternity. This cartoonish picture couldn't be further from the truth. Right now it's a place of tumult and sometimes even war. An equally cartoonish view would be that Satan, all red pyjamas, horns and trident of him, is currently sitting on a throne in hell, surrounded by flames, dispatching his minions to earth to do his bidding for him. Satan is not only free to roam the earth today, but the Bible tells us that he still has access to heaven. The Bible even tells us that he is the one who accuses them, that is, the believers, before our God day and night. In other words, Satan has access to the throne room of God. There is further evidence of this in Job, where Satan is described as entering the throne room of God to accuse Job in person. Satan's continued access to heaven guarantees that it remains a place of tumult. As above, so below is a reliable saying. When there's tumult in heaven, there's tumult on earth. Here we see Satan launching a desperate all-out war against God for control of heaven. The war, however, is unevenly matched. For a start, Satan has a much smaller army. Only a third of the angels joined him in his rebellion. 2/3 stayed loyal to God. Secondly, Satan's doom was set in stone from the day that Jesus Christ rose from the grave. The archangel Michael leads an army of angels to repel this attack, and Satan is defeated. The importance of Michael's role at this time was also emphasized to Daniel. At that time, Michael, the archangel who stands guard over your nation, will arise. Then there will be a time of anguish greater than any since nations first came into existence. But at that time, every one of your people whose name is written in the book will be rescued. The believers on earth seem to play a role in the victory too. It is said that they helped defeat Satan by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. So clearly the believers on earth are making an impact with prayers, intercession, and faithfulness in the face of persecution. In other words, believing Israel are helping with the rebirthing of Jesus back into the world through spiritual warfare. It's an interesting insight into the interplay between heaven and earth. After losing the war for heaven, Satan is thrown out for good. Heaven rejoices at his failure, but there is a warning for the earth that since Satan has come down to them, there will be great terror during the final 1,260-day period. Sure enough, Satan lands on the earth with a bump, pride bruised, and completely enraged because he knows that his time is now running out fast. This occurs midway through the Antichrist peace treaty, and that's why he takes control of the Antichrist at that time and goes into all-out war against Israel. His arrival on earth finds him in a state of desperation. Generally, Satan will operate through deceit, sleight of hand, and subterfuge. He won't reveal his presence if at all possible, and if he does, he will always appear as an angel of light. It's only in this panicked condition as he realizes his impending doom that the mask slips completely and all pretense of goodness is cast aside. When the dragon realized that he'd been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child, but she was given 2 wings like those of a great eagle so that she could fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times, and half a time. As we've already noted, the 144,000 believers escape to the wilderness and are kept safe there for the full duration of Jacob's trouble. But one of the ways that Satan will try to get them is through a flood. Then the dragon tried to drown the woman with a flood of water that flowed from his mouth, but the earth helped her by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that gushed out from the mouth of the dragon. And the dragon was angry at the woman and declared war against the rest of her children, all who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimony for Jesus. Remember what Daniel said, "The end will come with a flood and war, and its miseries are decreed from that time to the very end." Some try to spiritualize the flood, but it seems that this is a literal description. However, not even this will harm the faithful evacuees. A crack of some description in the earth's surface will drain the water away, and this will help God's people complete their escape. Frustrated, Satan will instead turn his attention to the rest of her children, all who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimony for Jesus. Who are the rest of Israel's children? Well, it seems that the 144,000 will have been witnessing and making converts during the trumpets. The 2 witnesses who will stay in Jerusalem during this time are also probably making converts, so the believers will continue to grow on earth through their efforts. It's these that Satan goes after. It's these who Jesus was talking about when he said, "In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones." What about the Antichrist himself, though? What kind of man will he be? Where will he come from? The answers lie right ahead.